All right, hello everyone. I'm back from the Pacific Northwest Pen Show 2025. It was a great show, and I guess the first thing I'm most excited to do after this show this year is to swatch this limited edition exclusive ink with Oblation Paper and Press, and it's their Oblation Marionberry. So it's a 15 ml bottle, 2025 Pacific Northwest Pen Show limited edition fountain pen ink, inspired by the Pacific Northwest, handmade in the USA. And my understanding is that this was done in collaboration with Andurilium ink. So they also have, Oblation also has their own regular line of ink, and my favorite from that is the olive. But those are made in collaboration with PNW. So this will be really cool. I love the bottle. It's a beautiful glass bottle. And to then the paper, I am quite certain is done at Oblation themselves, and then adhered onto the top and side of the bottle. So it's super gorgeous. Here's the sticker that they did in conjunction with this ink release. So 2025 Pacific Northwest Pen Show, Oblation, ink is my jam. So it was really cute. I really liked it. I did see the swatch at the show, but of course I'm very curious to see when I swatch it myself on a couple different variations of paper with a couple different techniques, what the ink looks like. I had my own table at the Pacific Northwest Pen Show with my brand Fountain Pendulum, and also I did a class, an ink swatching class, so I was super busy, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for the support there, both at the class and at the show at our table. We were very busy and had an awesome time. So I didn't have much time for shopping, but I definitely wanted to make sure that I grabbed this. And when I went to the Oblation table, I made sure to get a stamp. They have a really cool stamp there. And so I'll be cutting this out to add to my traveler's notebook. And here's the little Oblation bag that it came with also, so I'll probably use bits of this in my notebook as well. So just wanted to share that. So my thought for today is to go ahead and do some swatching together with this ink. Now I have both the Colorverse shuttle nibs, the aluminium and the brass, as well as all the Shuttles Hocoro nibs, fine, medium, 1.0, 2.0, Fude, the new brush tip that has recently come out, and I think I set them all now. So I'm going to swatch with those, as well with like a brush and things like that. So I have a Tomoe River paper notebook that I'm going to swatch in. I have a Kikoyo paper notebook I'm going to swatch in. I have two Colorverse swatch cards. I have a Waringall swatch card as well. And then I have some of these swatch cards that I made myself recently. And these are made using Kikoyo Campus paper. So I just kind of made these for fun, and I'll do some swatching on those as well. So let's go ahead and see what this ink looks like on these various papers and have some fun swatching as well. It already looks delicious. Oh my goodness, I can't wait. It's so fun. All right, let's start with the Colorverse. And I have the bottle one and the blank one, so I'm going to start with something simple. Go with this one, and let me get my brush ready. I use a watercolor brush when I do swatching a lot. So let me zoom in a bit. Oh yeah, and we had these at our table, and I had one left, so I'm happy to keep this to put it in my notebook as well. Why, hello, Atomic Elf 1. Thank you for joining. I was just about to start swatching the Marionberry ink. So, let's give it a dip. So I was giving the swatching class, and it was a 1 hour class. It was lots of fun, but I'll kind of talk about some of the things I was talking about there. I was talking about how it's very important to me in ink swatching to get the high and the low values of the ink. This represents fine nibs, dry writers, and then the high density areas are going to show broad nibs, wet nibs, etc. So there we go. Let it commence. All right, let's see. I'm going to use the shuttle for this. I think the brass shuttle. And I was really excited about this ink. First of all, I'm super into purple inks right now, which all kind of started with the acquisition of my first purple fountain pen, which is an Aurora Optima. It's the Viola. So let's see, this is going to be Oblation. But also it does tie in so beautifully with the whole Pacific Northwest vibe, the Marionberry, and the summer, since the show is in July, in summertime. So Oregon, Marionberry. I've been very fond of these Colorverse shuttle nibs. Ooh, purple ink reviews. Yes, I've been a couple people that I follow on YouTube as well have been really into purples. In conjunction with acquiring my first purple pen, I also attribute my dive into purple inks this year to little Coco Studio Allison, because that kind of like fed into my excitement of this exploration of purple inks this year. It's really pretty. So nice shading on that. No sheen really. In the really saturated areas it looks like slightly green, but not much. But I'm excited to swatch on the other papers because definitely on Tomoe River we're going to see more. What I would love, this is just like a personal wish, but when I think Marionberry ink, what my mind goes to is the vivid colors of Marionberry if you had it like in a pie, and you know that color that like that Marionberry kind of filling that's kind of like the fresh fruit with some sugar and all that tossed together, like those bright colors that would be left on your plate, that bright purple. I would love to see something like that. So when I saw the sticker, I would love, see this medium here? So not the real light part, not this really dark, but like right in there, that would have hit me hard for like a gorgeous Marionberry ink. This is my personal preference, obviously, but I would have liked it a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more leaning on, I guess you would say, the pink side. I'd say that it's picking up a little bit more flat and gray on camera than it is in real life. It's a little bit more vivid and less grayscale than it's showing on camera. But all the same, let's try some more papers because, like I said, I think on the Tomoe River we'll get, you know, what swatchers would call a true read. So why don't I just skip to that? Why wait? And then we'll keep playing with other swatch cards. let's just go for it. Let's see, what method do I want to use? I really like using, you know, some people use Ziploc bags and things to do swatching. I like using this thick plastic that I harvested from packaging, and it has kind of gotten wrinkled, which makes it work even better. So I like doing that, and I like using a little pipette. This is my favorite instrument. Oh, you know what I'm missing? A glass spoon. I should have that in my toolkit, my swatching kit. So I'll grab that. But yeah, let's use this pipette and maybe a. Is there a bigger one? Okay, yeah. Let me get this going here. Yeah, I'll use my pipette. So let me get some drops here. Sometimes I put it in the paper, but I kind of like doing it lately on the plastic itself. The reason for that is on the paper, as soon as it hits, you have kind of a limited amount of time to move things around. Versus if I use the plastic, see how I can like take my time, organize things or disorganize things all over the place. Perfect. And then I can flip it over. And like this, pick it up, move it around again, do some of this kind of thing. There we go. Okay, this is looking a lot more like what I would appreciate in a Marionberry ink. And again, let me see, and maybe if I put my lighting up a little bit more, I'll put it up to the max and see if that helps. It is definitely more pink and vivid in person than how it's showing on camera. If I was better with camera work, maybe I could display that better, but it is a little bit darker than I would say ideal, but I like being able to see this. So I'm going to let that dry. We'll definitely look at everything dry as well, but I want to have fun swatching on all the papers. So that's on the Tomoe River Sanzen, the new Tomoe River. And let's do a Wearingeul card this time. I've been very pleased. I've been trying a lot of different swatch cards. In fact, I can show you my swatch book of different swatches and different swatch cards and how they've been performing for me. But I've been very pleased with both the Colorverse swatch cards and the Wearingeul. Let me know what you guys are enjoying using for swatch cards in the comments. I'd be very curious to know what your preferences are right now. Blackberry Cobbler. Yes, that sounds good. Although really I would like Marionberry. Okay, this is showing the color quite nicely, I think. Got some low saturation and some high, which is perfect. I did overshoot here. Perfect. And then we can write. Okay, let's see. What do I want to write with? Let's just go ahead and do the brass again. Actually, I'll do the aluminium one this time so you guys can see the difference in the writing. And so far with the Colorverse Shuttles, I've definitely noticed that they're a little less quote-unquote blobby in the writing compared to the Kakamori. So I'm going to keep writing with them. I'd love to do a head-to-head comparison with them relatively soon, but I'm really happy with these so far. And just like with the Kakamori, I do prefer the stainless steel, this one's actually aluminum, over the brass because I like fine writers. And the stainless steel and the aluminum are finer writers compared to the brass. I also find both the Colorverse swatch cards and the wearing gall or wearing ghoul to dry quite quickly, which I really like. So that's working out well. I'll let those dry. I'm really excited about this ink, and I'm going to compare it to some other purples that I've been really into so far this year. I was tempted to get 2 bottles, but I calmed myself down and was like, 1 is sufficient. I know it's small, but we'll be all right. Okay, how about using a glass spoon? I did this in my class too. I'm really enjoying glass spoons right now. Julia here really encouraged me via her content to be doing this. Previous to using a glass spoon, what my go-to swatching creative method was a stone. So this is like one of those pocket stones that you would use kind of as an aid to appease some anxiety or something like that. I forget what they're called. I think they're called thumb stones because they have this kind of indent for your thumb. And these are really cool for swatching. I can show you how this works. But that was my go-to. But I've been doing a lot of glass spoon. You'll see that they're a very similar shape. So the method, a worry stone. Thank you. Yeah. They'll give a very similar effect. The only real difference is that this is kind of semi-translucent. You can see the color through it, but you have to hold it like this, which I have no problem with. But with the glass spoon, this one has a slight pink hue to it, but it is a lot more transparent. So you can see the ink as you're pulling it around, which is kind of fun. And then also you can hold it with the handle. And on this particular one, on the back of the handle, it's round. So it's perfect for swatching if you want smaller swatches as well. So what I like doing with this one is getting my bottle of ink. I dip the back end in, and then I'll put down a trail of where I'm going to be swatching. Como ça? Something like that. And then I'll flip it around and kind of make an organic shape. It always comes out differently, and I'm totally cool with that. I think that's part of the fun, is no two will look alike. Yes, so there's a comment that some stones would have micro cracks or porosity that could retain ink. That's absolutely true. If I show this close up, you can see a slight crack through there and some dark spots that are previous ink from swatching. I'm okay with that. But it's good to know. Good to give a heads up on that. I was quite particular when I was picking my stone, although to be honest, when I picked this out originally, I had no idea or no thought of using it for ink. I just thought it was a nice souvenir from a trip, and I did find it very comforting. And then later, when I was looking for kind of out-of-the-box objects to swatch with, I started using it for swatching. So far it strikes me as a pretty wet ink. I'm going to try to do a swatch with less saturation to see if I can pull some of those lighter colors like from here. That's something that we should kind of always be aware of when we are swatching, is try not to oversaturate our swatches, because then you get a perception that the ink is darker than its true capabilities, its range, its true range. So let's put up here. Need a little more ink here. There we go. Oblation. And then down here we'll put the Oregon Marionberry. I remember, as I recall anyway, that I looked up Marionberry a while back and found that it was a hybrid berry, kind of a cross berry between two berries, and I think it was blackberry and huckleberry, if my memory serves correctly, but I could be wrong. So again, this is picking up a little bit darker and a little bit more muted than it is in person. And I want to try to do a swatch with more lighter saturation so we can see some more variation. But let me show you the ones that have dried so far. Here's the Tomoe River one. That's pretty good, honestly. I like this a lot better. It can be that these swatches are more absorbent, so and maybe I am using too much, a little more ink than ideal for my swatching, so I'm going to back off on that, particularly so I can pull some of these lighter colors. Now in this very high saturated area, I can see like a slight green sheen, but this was very, very saturated. And this lighter area is a light more vibrant in person, and it is hitting that yum factor that I was looking for originally, that's like Marionberry pie of colorful purple all over your plate, from like Berry Smear. So I'm really happy with that. That doesn't show as well on these swatching papers. And I would say, of course, it's a combination of swatching method and paper, because it's always going to be technique and paper and tools. And I'd say I like the Warringall one the best, beside the Tomoe River. And then the Colorverse ones. Let's swatch on some Kikoyo paper and see how that fares. And let me know what kind of papers you've been enjoying swatching with as well. I would be curious to know. Let's try swatching with this Hocoro brush tip. This is new. It came out recently. And so far, I'm having fun with it. I'll give you a tip about it in a minute when it's time to clean it. But you'll see that the bristles go way back, and so it holds a pretty decent amount of ink. Some people do brush lettering, and if you have such a talent, such a skill, then that's something that you could, I think, do successfully with this tip. I use italics, I use flex nibs, but I have not acquired the technique to use brush lettering yet. I would love to. So it doesn't hold an ink reservoir like that the Hocoro makes, that are on the other nibs. So let me show, now that we're on the subject. This is a Hocoro fine nib, and there's no reservoir. It's just the stainless steel nib. Here is the Fude, the stainless steel nib, and then the reservoir. And I can show you what the reservoir looks like on the inside, because I think it's helpful to see the amount of ink that it does hold. It just takes a little, see if I can get a good enough grip. There we go. Okay, so this is how it pops off. It fits in right here, like this. And I have to kind of use a paper towel to get it off, just to get a little extra grip. And that is the stainless steel nib. And this gray piece behind it is the reservoir, which acts basically as a feed. And you can separate them. And you can kind of see this cavity within this plastic piece, so all that void, that is where all the excess ink is stored, and it's quite generous. And it holds a substantial amount of ink, which in my mind takes these Hocoro nibs right up there with the Shuttles as far as ink capacity goes. On a previous video, a previous live I did on the Hocoros and the Shuttles, I wrote an entire page using the Hocoro fine with the reservoir versus without the reservoir. With the Hocoro fine, I was only able to write, I think, a sentence. So it's a major, major difference. And of course, it depends on the type of nib size that you're using, because the fine doesn't take much ink to write versus the 1.0s. 2.0s would use ink rapidly. So the reservoir will hold a lot ink, but it'll be used a lot faster on those broader nib sizes. So this is dried really nice. I really like this. This looks good. You can see the lighter values. Let me go ahead and let's use a Hocoro medium to, let me see, write the, okay, so by default the Hocoro medium does not come with a reservoir. We'll just do a little dip. Right here we'll do Oblation, and then Oregon, and the ink's gone. Another small dip. Marionberry. Sorry, that was off camera for a sec. When it comes to swatching, I really don't feel like the reservoir is necessary. It actually, if anything, you want to do shallow dips so that you don't waste ink when you just write the name and then rinse off. But if you're writing to any length, the reservoirs are excellent to have, because it really does make a big difference as far as how much ink and how much writing you can get done in one dip. Let's see, the fine. Let's go ahead and use this. Okay, so going back to the brush, there's no reservoir, that plastic reservoir. However, the bristles extend back. Let me point one of the instrument back to here. And I don't really know how far back here. So it does hold. If you do a generous dip, you don't wipe off on the rim at all, you're getting a nice amount of ink for swatching. And I don't really know how much lettering you could accomplish with it, because I don't have the ability to do lettering to a satisfying legible way. But let's do another swatch using this Hocoro brush. And I think I'm going to do something more traditional like that, so that you can see how much ink it could hold. And there's still more. So I definitely think this is well done for a swatching purpose. And so let me use the Hocoro fine this time for writing. This one also does not have a reservoir, so we'll just do a nice dip and put Oblation here. I've been kind of liking to do the brand in all capitals lately, and then the name in cursive, but sometimes I forget. And let me talk to you a little bit about these Hocoros for those of you who aren't familiar or don't have them yet. There's 6 nib options: fine, medium, 1.0 stub, 2.0 stub, although it's quite crisp, honestly, fude, and brush. And the cool thing about these is you can get a barrel, you can get these nibs, which are sold separately also, and you can just interchange them because it interlocks. You can hear the little click, and it pops out again. And also, you can store one nib in here when not in use, putting it in this way, which I think is genius. I'm so extremely pleased with the Hocoro lineup. It's absolutely my favorite. I know a lot of people like the Pilot and, you know, various other dip pens out there. This is hands down my favorite when it comes to stainless steel nibs. However, when it comes to this type of nib, so far I've preferred Colorverse Shuttles over the Kakamori. I'll talk about that in a little bit when I swatch with them some more, but I'm extremely fond of these Hocoros. The fine writes beautifully. It is as toothy as you would expect from a fine stainless steel Japanese made nib, but that said, it's exceptionally smooth for what it is. The medium writes beautifully. It's quite bulbous. You can see there's a generous amount of tipping, if I can get my focus on here. There we go. And it writes very smooth, very pleasing for a medium. I'm not a big medium writer myself, but I can appreciate it for what it is. I do find, let's do a little writing with the other nibs, and I'll bring out my notebook. We'll lay some ink down. Why don't I show you how I usually do with my stone. So usually with my stone, I'll get my pipette, a little eyedropper pipette here. I like these little ones a lot. And I'll get a little ink. I'll lay it down like this. And I'll usually either do a circle with it, or you can do some obscure, pattern like that. Little ink left over, I just dip it in water and wipe it off. No problem. Let's go ahead with the rest of the Hokoros so I can show you. So we've done fine and we've done medium. Let me show you let's do the Fude next. So let me get this one out for you. And as I was mentioning before, the system clicks in the back, and then you can pop it in. This is the first one in the lineup that does come with that gray reservoir to hold the additional ink. So we'll dip that. Fudes are a ton of fun to write with. I certainly could use more practice to work on my technique for it, but I do have fun with it. You can write in caps, you can write in cursive, but the idea is that it has this upturned nib. So it's meant to kind of behave like a brush-like effect. And I think that kind of originated from Japanese calligraphy, if I'm not mistaken. With this, the belly of the nib kind of calls for you to hold it at a certain angle to get a sweet spot on it. So let's do in caps. Oblation. And it gives you a similar line variation like you would get kind of like from an architect. Similar, not the same, but in the sense that if you do vertical lines versus horizontal being thicker and broader. So vertical and then horizontal if I do the right kind of positioning of this nib. Now, the higher up you hold it, the finer the line in both directions. As you lower your elevation, it hits the belly of the nib and gets broader. It's a really fun nib to work with. Puts down a nice amount of ink. So let's do this in cursive. Marionberry. But this is the effect that traditionally you would be looking for to achieve. I'll do it the best that I can, but like I said, I could definitely use improvement on my technique. There. That's a good stroke. Let me show you up close. Do you see how, like, at the beginning on the left, it's broader and then it goes finer? That's the brush-like effect that you can accomplish using a Fude, that upturned nib. Sailor also offers the Fude in the Demonin fountain pen, but I love being able to get a Fude at this very approachable price. I believe it's $10 for these Hokoro nibs retail, and that's awesome that you can just pick one up like that. It's also, I just did a full dip, and let's see how much ink and what kind of swatching experience we can have with this using a lower angle. So that's kind of how the swatch would look. So it's a really fun writing experience, I think. Okay, so there is the fude. I'll rinse that off. And I'll say while I'm rinsing it off that the really nice thing about these dip systems, particularly these compared to some of the older dip styles of fountain pens, is the cleaning is quick and easy. Let's take a look at the 1.0. No reservoir by default, but you can install the reservoirs and swap the reservoirs on all of these, which is really cool. And I would recommend it for the 1.0, honestly. So we'll do Hocoro 1.0 millimeters. These are quite crisp, and if you haven't used a stub before, they are rotation sensitive, meaning that you really have to be engaged in your writing. And if both feet, meaning like the two parts on either side of the tine, are not contacting the page in a flush manner as you're writing, it won't write properly. You'll experience skipping and scratchiness. And you want to have a light hand, and you want to be aware of not having a rotation as you write to be able to enjoy these nibs. So a light hand is really important, honestly, with all of them, but especially with these. You can use them in cursive. You can definitely do a formal calligraphy lettering, which I don't do. I mean, I can kind of make one up just to show you the way that you can write sharply with them. But this does run out of ink quite quickly, you can see, without the reservoir. We'll skip over to the 2.0 now. There we go. This is a stub, a very crisp one. This one does have a reservoir. So as I dip, you can see that the ink pools. I didn't do a full dip all the way back, so it's not going to have an immense amount of ink. And we'll right here. The wider the stub or italic is, the more effort and focus that it takes to ensure that your writing is correct and that you're not rotating so that you can write properly. Otherwise, you'll get skipping and scratchiness in your writing experience. But I think these are really fun because, again, very approachable price, and you can begin to experience this really broad nib that will lay down and show off your inks. You can use shimmer inks without worrying about your fountain pens, and it provides a beautiful shading. So whether you're journaling, if you're doing cards, if you're doing a heading, you can use this in so many different applications where you don't have to pick up a fountain pen with a stub or an italic or anything like that. It's just a dip pen. So I think those are really, really fun. And you can see how much more you can see the ink with that 2.0. It's just so much fun. So let's see. I think we got all the Hokoros now. Let's try a little swatching application with the shuttles, because I kind of want to show how those work. And I think I'll start a new page just so there's some room. I laid down the ink pretty thick and it did go through, which is surprising, honestly. Okay, so let's go back to this brass. I'm going to do a full dip. And this is really one of the differences between the Hokoros and the Kakamori and the Culliver shuttle, is that little drilled hole that acts as an additional ink reservoir in addition to these groove lines that hold ink as well. So at a low elevation, let's do some swatching with this. Again, a key to this is light pressure. And you want to rotate your nib kind of like this while you're using it, because each channel holds ink. If you hold it in the same spot and go a distance, you'll run out of ink. So you want to kind of rotate it gently and write gently as well. If you put pressure down, these are really sharp. So it can easily cut the paper, which distorts your swatch because it cuts up those paper fibers, and then it kind of like bleeds a bit and feathers and does funky stuff. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm gonna lower my writing angle and let me get some more ink because I used it up. Lower it so I can do some big writing. This is the fun of these pens. Using one nib, we can get such a variation. Let's see if I can write bigger. Yep. And let me see if I can hold this even lower. Let me get some more ink. Sorry, that's my, I'm going to remove this as I write. There we go. So look at how big the writing can get. And now let's do the reverse. Let's do as vertical as possible. All in one nib. It's really fun. So let's do some lines. Sometimes it takes a little bit of rotating to get that happy spot, and like I said, you kind of have to rotate the nib as you write because those channels will run out of ink. So you kind of, and that's true of any dip nib that utilizes channels instead of having feeds, right? So glass dip pens that have those grooves in them too, same thing. You got to keep rotating that dip nib while you're writing so that the various channels can offer ink down to the paper. So pretty cool. So this is the brass. Let me do something similar to this with the stainless steel and see if there's much of a difference both in feel and in line variation capabilities. We already know, or I should say I already know, that the sorry, not stainless steel, the aluminum is a different material that's harder, and it offers a finer result and also a toothier experience by comparison to the brass. Okay, so I can feel grooves there. I think the key, again, is focusing on having a light hand and not pushing the nib. I think that's our instinct, right? We want ink to come out, so we push. So you have to use a light hand, be aware of your writing rotation, and your elevation, and how much ink you have, and moving the nib as you go. Rotating the nib to access the different channels. I'm seeing a good comparison here as far as the capabilities. Let's do a vertical. This is a lot finer. A lot. If this is a fine or a medium fine, this is a fine extra fine. And therefore, it feels like a fine or an extra fine as far as feedback and tooth. But I would not, we again kind of have to remember in a technical way that there's definitely a difference between feedback and scratchy. A lot of people automatically are like, it's scratchy. It can be scratchy if it's a sharp instrument and you're pushing really hard on it. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's okay. It's a learning curve, and we have to kind of train ourselves with fine writing instruments to have a light hand, because I think for most of us, coming from using pencils and pens and things like this, we're used to using a heavy hand. All right, also the other side, I've got some more swatch cards that I want to play with here. And here we go. I'm going to use my pipette to do some, and my syringe. Where is my syringe? Let me get my paper back out. This is a dangerous game I'm playing. Okay, here we go. Blunt tip syringe. A little bit of ink. Sorry, I was off camera. My bad. There we go. Here's a comparison of the Tomoe River paper to some Kikoyo paper. Different swatching techniques, but you can see the color of the ink there. I wanted to show you my swatch book as well. And show you some of the different, this is going to reflect a lot, but this is what I was talking about with color swatching ink densities. This is what I would consider an oversaturated ink swatch. Unideal to see the attributes of the ink. And then here we can see the low and the high. So to me, that's an ideal swatch. These are all the exact same color. It's just a matter of the ink swatching method and the paper. So color versus paper, oversaturated in my opinion, and then low and high saturations. And then these are both Wearingeul or Wearingeul. Oversaturated, here's one with low and high. And then this is a Dominant Industries swatch card. In my opinion, oversaturated and low and high values. So some of the swatches that I did today, I would say are more saturated than ideal. And that takes practice and purpose to do that. Some of the ones that I think visually turned out the best, let's take a look at them now that they're dry. I would say that this is more saturated than ideal for me. You can see some of the low saturation areas, but it's more high than low saturation, so that's not ideal. Here, same thing. I want to see more of this low saturation area compared to the high saturation, so it's not an even representation of the ink. And this one turned out quite well. You can definitely get some low saturation and high. This is ideal so that you can see what the ink capabilities are. In that high saturated area, if the ink has sheen, you'll see it. And in the lighter areas, you'll see how the shading behaves and how much it has. And the low saturation will show kind of more truly what the ink looks like if you're using a fine writer, if you're using a drier writer, versus the high saturation is going to show if you are using a broader nib or a very wet nib like this, when I used the dip nib. That color matches the dark saturation, not the light. Here's another one. This is on the Hocoro paper. This is cool. This I used with the Hocoro brush tip. So I like this. We got the dark and the light well separated, and we can see both. This was also with the Hocoro brush, but a little more fun, I think, than just doing like a more basic swatch like this. It's a little more interesting, but we do see the high saturation and the low, so I like that. And I always like using a dip nib to write the ink also. It just is nice to get a complete representation instead of just using another pen. This was on the Tomoe River paper. Really great representation, the best really, because we have a combination of a technique that shows good saturation of ink, the highs and the lows, in combination with really one of the best papers that you can use to display the ink capabilities in color. And here is still drying the splatter that I did, and on Hocoro paper here. You can see here though, even if you're doing a straight line with the color shuttle nib, see how you can see the high and low saturations there? So all in all, I think this ink feels like it's going to be a good writer. It's hard to tell until you ink it, of course, but from the feeling that I get of how it comes off the dip nibs, I think it's a wetter ink, possibly. And I like on the Tomoe River paper especially what the ink looks like. This again was the Oblation. Let me put the lid on. This was the Oblation Paper and Press Oregon Marionberry. This is the ink that was done as a limited edition for the 2025 Pacific Northwest Pen Show. It was a great show. I loved it. It's such a good energy show. It was at a new venue this year. This is the third year, and it was a lovely venue. It felt roomy and airy. There were lots of areas out in the lobby, in the halls, to be able to sit at tables and play with the things, chat with people, get your inks and paper and pens out and try and look at what you're buying and all that. So it was a fantastic show. I had a great time with the class. I did an ink swatching class there too, and we did have so much fun at our table too. We had a ink swatching station at our table where people could try the Hokoros and the colorverse shuttles as well. And I think people had a really nice time being able to try those in person. So this is still drawing, but I'll show this too. So I'm looking forward to inking this pen up. I'll show you, I was mentioning before that I have gotten my first purple pen. Let's see if it's successful. Yes, okay. So here it is. This is the Aurora Optima Viola. So it's a purple pen, but it's almost leaning to the indigo. It's a little bit on the cooler side of purple, more blue in it than red really, and quite dark. So is this like a perfect match ink-wise? Not really, but I tend to like this kind of purple that is a little more earthy and natural and not like super vibrant. So I like that, and I was curious to compare. This has been my favorite purple this year, the Tiramisu Innocent Mauve, and I really like it, but I really like this Oregon Marionberry too. It's a little bit darker, honestly, than what would be ideal for me personally. Let's show these side by side on the same swatch paper. There we go. So on the left, the Tiramisu Innocent Mauve. On the right, the Oblation Marionberry Ink. I really like this a lot. I really do. I'm going to enjoy my bottle a ton. I don't really know which one I like better. They're different. But here's another one that I can show you, the same paper with the two different inks. That's showing up a little dark, but I think you get the idea. But yeah, it's really, really good. A little bit lighter, and I would have said in my ideal of what Marionberry ink would be, it would be perfection. Let me show you. Oh, you know what I should do is add a little water to it. But look at this sticker that they made. So when we look at these colors that are a little bit more light and pink and poppy, I love that. And we're getting, you know, these darker shades that they kind of display in the middle. But I love this concept. I love this ink. It's fabulous. And it feels like it's going to be a really good writer as well. So let me do like a little bit of a chromatography effect by adding a little water. I don't do this often, so I could certainly use more practice in doing it, but all the same, it'll be fun. I'll do this, and we're almost an hour, so that would be a good place to call it. And I'll just clean my brush off and put some water down. open this bottle up again. These are 15 ml bottles for this limited run of ink. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's by Anirillium Ink. That was who they collaborated with to make the ink with. And it is going to be available through Oblation. They had it at the show, and they mentioned that at the end of the show for the weekend, they would have this limited edition ink available to purchase on their website. So that looks cool. I like that. This is a technique I've been working on, and when I was doing my ink swatching class, I had an attendee that had one of those little spray bottles, like a very small, more of a mister, really, spray mister, in the class. I think the individual had a watercolor background, if I'm not mistaken. Those are used in watercoloring a lot, but the individual sprayed the paper, the swatch card, with the mister, and then did the swatch, and it turned out super cool. I really liked it. But this is going to give you an artist approach of how the ink behaves. Kind of gives a similar effect to doing a chromatography strip. And you can see the lighter colors that are within this ink at play, because the I guess you could say the color starts to separate, or I don't want to get too technical because I could be wrong, but the different attributing colors within the ink begin to separate and lighten, and so you can kind of see the effect. And it does depend on the paper you're using. This is just a Kokoyo swatch card that I made. If we used some Tomo River, maybe we can do that real quick too. It might be a little bit more dramatic. We can do that. Alright, this is the Tomo River Sanzen. Then I try to kind of lift this off so it doesn't warp the paper behind it. Let me get these Galen Leather Tomo River notebooks come with a little leather blotter, so I'm going to put that underneath. This one's, they're probably going to take quite a while to dry. Alright, so I think that's good. I accomplished what I wanted, and I was really excited to swatch this ink that I picked up at the Pacific Northwest Pen Show at Oblation, and it's going to be a lot of fun to write with and continue swatching with. And I think in my Traveler's Notebook, I'll also do, a spread for the Pacific Northwest Pen Show. This was the highlight for me. I was very delighted with the concept, and I think the ink is beautiful also. So I'll thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you had fun experiencing this Marionberry ink with me, along with a couple different papers and various swatch cards and methods. And if you want to know more about the Hocoro or the shuttle, check out my previous live. I think I covered them pretty well today, but if you have any other questions or comments or want to tune in on your own experience with them, feel free to comment. So enjoy. It's all up to you now.